What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. Got a special video for you here. As you can see, we've got two Inspire 3X graphics cards, one being the 5070 Ti and the other the 5080. The 5070 I've always said is the better value card, but the 5080 has come down in price and can be found at its MSRP. I did get this for $999.99. So today we're going to do the ultimate comparison between the two cards and just compare the performance to price. We're also going to normalize the 5080 to 300 watts and see how 300 watts to 300 watts performs, and we shall see if the 5080 may be worth getting. So I got the 5070 Ti on launch back in March was that. Got it from overclockers.co.uk and I've been happy with it. Yeah, my initial impressions was I was a bit upset that you couldn't change the TDP from 100%. So 300 watts is what you've got. 300 watts is the maximum of this particular card. You can get other 5070 Ti's that you can adjust the power limit, but this one you cannot. So I did want the 5080, but that was out of stock straight away. So I saw the 5080 on sale on Amazon at its MSRP of $999.99 and thought it'd be silly not to buy it and do a comparison. I did need another graphics card for another system I was building anyway, so it made sense to do that, and I've bought it so you don't have to, because I still think the 5070 Ti is probably the better value card, but we'll conclude at the end to see if that's the case ultimately or not. But as for the design of the two cards, I think the cooler is identical. Both have got the same sort of pass-through design, the same three fans. They've got the two heat sinks either side, or the fin stacks either side of the GPU with 4 heat pipes each. I don't know if you can see in there, can you? So you got that sort of fin stack there. You can see, yeah, you can see like what the one goes from the GPU itself, which it looks like it covers the memory modules as well. So the one on the left looks like it's doing the actual fin stack is covering the memory modules as well, and then the flow through to the right is literally just doing the GPU and probably like some of the MOSFETs and stuff, or the VRM should I say. But yeah, I think both cards are the same. Let's have a quick look at the 5080 one, just to conclude. But there's no sort of designation like of what card it is. You wouldn't know which is which if you didn't look at the, you know, the sticker on the side. But yeah, same setup. Look, you can see the two sort of fin stacks either side of the GPU. 4 heat pipes there. Flip it over. Look through the flow through. You can see 4 heat pipes there. Yeah, it's all identical. Let's weigh them and see if they're any different. Right, we've got the trusty measuring scale here. Let's first weigh the 5070 Ti, place it on there, see what we get. $966 grams. Solid. There is quite a lot of metal on them, like there is, it's all metal case. Oh, 968, 2 grams heavier for the 5080. So with that 2 gram difference in weight, I can conclude that the coolers are exactly the same. That 2 grams additional weight on the 5080 is probably down to the bigger GPU itself, as well maybe some additional power circuitry. So with the testing, we're going to do some synthetic benches out of the box, just run them at stock clocks, and then we'll do a max stable overclock for both cards, and then as I mentioned before, the power normalized one will also do that at max clocks. So for the 5080 we're going to be running an offset of 450 megahertz. The memory is maxed out, and it also has a plus 5% TDP that you can increase, so that makes the card a 380 watt card. On the 5070 Ti, we're going to be doing an offset of 380 max memory, and the TDP is just what it is, 100%. You can't do anything with it. And then we'll do some games as well as in the synthetics, just what I normally, sort of regularly play. And then obviously at the end we'll conclude to see whether the 5080 is worth the lower price. Right guys, just to go over the test system I'm going to use for the comparison quickly. I'm going to use my Ryzen 7 7700 system in this IKEA cube, Kallax cube, just for the ease of swapping the GPUs over. I could use my 9900X system, but it's a bit more difficult to swap the GPUs. So it's still going to be a good test. It's still going to be a good comparison, card to card. So yeah, so this is it in the box. So let's get it out and we'll have a quick look at the components. Right, this is it out of the box. There's the IKEA Kallax cube there. It's all made from Kallax accessories, apart from the motherboard base plate that it's mounted to. And I've used a few brackets from other sort of systems and sort of adapted them to fit this. But it's running a 280mm AIO with push-pull on the fans. We've got the Ryzen 7 7700 CPU, Gigabyte Aurora Elite B650 motherboard, 32 gig of Vengeance 6000 mega transfer memory. I think it's just 36 cache latency, but I think it's been tightened up a bit. And then underneath we've got some standard sort of hard drives, just keep some media and stuff on. We've got a Asus Tough Gaming 850 power supply there, and at the minute we've currently got the 50, is it the 50? Make sure, yeah, 5080 in there. So we're going to test that, go through all the tests, and then we'll swap over and then we'll conclude. Just a couple more things while we're looking at the test system. For those of you like wondering, why is he using an IKEA Kallax case as a PC case? Well, I play on 4K telly. I've got other Kallax units, and it's just stealthy. Keeps the missus happy, keeps her off my back, and I thought this was a good solution. But yeah, also just to mention, obviously we've got the fan at the back just to help draw the hot air out and keep everything cool. So yeah, with that out of the way, let's get some testing done. Right, welcome back. You join me back at the computer to go over the results. We're going to do it in two sections. So first of all, we're going to go over the synthetic benchmarks that we got from 3D Mark, and then we're going to go over the gaming benchmarks that we got as well. But just before that though, I just wanted to highlight something that's important, and that's that basically that some benchmarks and games, they're not all equal. They don't all stress the GPU equally. And what do I mean by that is, well, the GPU might be pegged out at 100%, but the power consumption of the card won't be 100%. It'll be less than 100. And that's because whatever it's running, the workload is not finding it too stressful, and it's working quite efficiently to do that, to render that workload or whatever the task is at like below maximum power. And a good example of that is like older sort of games and benchmarks. And these two benchmarks here, Heaven and Valley, they're old, probably, I don't know, 15-year-old benchmarks, DirectX 11. And these won't stress the GPU. And I don't use these benchmarks to find a stable overclock, just for that reason, because it doesn't stress the GPU enough. But just to show that visually though, so you can see I've got OBS running in the background. We're currently running 9-10% load on the GPU. That's pulling 20% TDP, which equates to 60-70 watts. So if we open up an instance of Valley here at 1440p, you can see that now the GPU load goes up to 99%, so maxed out. But the power consumption is still only 83%, which equates to 260 watts. And that's, like I say, this is an old benchmark. It's not stressing the GPU as much. So I wanted to highlight that because I think especially with the 5080, it's got that 5% increase that you can apply in Afterburner. So you can go up to, this is my 4080 on this system, but you can go up to 105%. So you increase the power of the card from 360 watts to 380. But in some situations, some scenarios, benchmarks, games, it makes little or no difference. So I just wanted to highlight that before we go over the results. So we'll do that now. Right, juicy section results, starting with the 5070 Ti. If you remember, we did a stock out of the box run, and then we also applied a max stable overclock. So in this case, it was plus 380 megahertz on the core, and then max memory applied on MSI Afterburner. So for Solo Extreme, then we got a score of 28157. That's stock, and then with the max stable overclock applied, we got a 7.5% uplift there. On Steel Nomad, we got an 8.7% increase there. Speedway, 8.4%. Port Royal, we got a nice 9.2% uplift. And then on the DirectX 12 Ray Trace benchmark, we got a nice 12.2% uplift. Moving on to the 5080. So remember on this one, we did a power normalized option as well. So we did it at stock, max stable overclock, and then a max stable overclock, but then reduced to 300 watts to do a side-by-side comparison of the two cards, to the both 300 watt cards then effectively. So Solar Extreme then, at stock, we've got a score of 32497. With the max stable overclock, we got a 10.2% uplift, and then with the max stable overclock limited to 300 watts, we got a 4.8% uplift over stock. So effectively, you can look at it the other way there. So by reducing the power to 300 watts from 380, you're losing roughly 5% performance on that test. Steel Nomad then, 11.1% uplift, max OC, 6.3% when normalized to 300 watts. Speedway, 7.6%, max OC, and you're only gaining 1.16% uplift over stock when limited to 300 watts. But you are still losing 6% performance from 380 watts to 300 watts. Port Royal, 12.2% uplift over on the max OC over stock, and then a 3.5% uplift with the 300 watt applied to it. So there were you losing 9% performance, which is quite a lot. So that 80 watts is gaining quite a bit more out of the card. And then on the DirectX 12 ray trace feature, with the max OC, we only got 11.4% uplift over stock for both the max OC and the 300 watt capping, because it was only using about 86% TDP, because obviously it doesn't find it a stressful workload. So just so for the max, sorry, I should have mentioned, for the max stable overclock on this card, on the 5080, we did apply a plus 450 megahertz offset to the core, and then max memory, and then obviously for this section, for the max OC stable overclock setting, we are utilizing that extra 5% TDP as well. Right, so this is the final slide for the comparison on the synthetic benchmarks. So we've got the 5080 versus the 5070 Ti. So in Solar Extreme, we can see stock for stock settings, the 5080 is 15.4% quicker than the 5070 Ti. Max Overclock for Max Overclock, it's 18.1%, increases its lead a bit there. And then when power normalized, the 5080 is still 12.7% quicker than the Max Overclock 5070 Ti. What's the reason for doing this? What's this basically showing? Well, if we look at the two cards, by putting them both to 300 watts, we're basically measuring the performance gain from the extra cores and TMUs and ROPs and stuff that the 5080 has over the 5070 Ti. So I think it's quite a nice sort of comparison. If they were both 300 watt cards, how much performance you'd gain from that bigger chip. In Steel Nomad, this is where we see the biggest gains. So stock for stock is 25.9% quicker than the 5070 Ti. Max overclock to max overclock, we're nearly enough at 30% increase there. So the 5080 is 30% quicker than the 5070 Ti when they are both at their maximum overclock settings. And then when power normalized, the 5080 is still 21% quicker than the 5070. So that's quite an increase. When they're both 300 watt cards, it's still 21% quicker than the 5070 Ti. And that extra 80 watts of power is gaining an extra 7% there. So yeah, that's quite nice. Speedway, max, stock for stock, we're looking at a 16.2% differential. Max overclock to max overclock, the 5070 Ti is pulling back a little bit, reducing that difference to 15.3%. And then power normalized, it's only 14% quicker than the 5070 Ti. Port Royal, 15% quicker stock for stock, 18.2% quicker on the Max OC to Max OC, and then 14.2% when power normalized. And then the DirectX 12 ray trace feature is 19.2% quicker stock for stock, 21.5% for both the Max OC and power normalized. Moving quickly on to the gaming benchmark results then. So I've done 5 games. We've done the new Borderlands 4 game that I got with the 5080. Came as a bundle, which is nice. I've done Cyberpunk 2077, Space Marine 2, Hogwarts Legacy, and Doom: The Dark Ages. Apart from the Borderlands 4, I had these games installed on my system to make it nice and easy. So just to go over the settings that I've used to do the testing. So they're all at 4K. And then they've all got DLSS upscaling, and apart from I think the new Borderlands 4, they were all on quality preset on DLSS. Borderlands 4, I had to run it at balance setting to get an increased frame rate there. What I try to do with these are settings that I will play at myself. So what I normally do is I'll make sure that it's sort of around 50 or 60 frames per second natively, and then that's still with DLSS enabled quality, and then I'll enable 2 times frame generation to get myself at around that 120 frames a second, because the resolution, the refresh rate of my TV is 144 hertz. So sort of to get close to that. If I'm not getting like around 60 frames a second without the frame gen enabled, then I'll either knock back the textures, or I'll go from DLSS quality to DLSS balanced, and see if that gives me enough a difference as a sort of baseline frames per second to increase to 100 with the frame generation. So what we will do, actually, we'll just open up Borderlands 4 and just show roughly what I mean with the settings. So let's do that now. All right, we're in Borderlands 4 then. This was one of the games that I couldn't run it in quality. I did have to play it. I'll adjust it to a balance setting for the DLSS. It is a really demanding game. I don't know if it's the game engine. Well, I did all my recording with Intel PresentMon, and then all the raw data that captures during when you're doing the testing, I just sort of gone through the spreadsheet and had a look at what was in there. And basically, the GPU, it doesn't matter which card it was, it's not pegged out 100%, and the frame time is always waiting for something. So I'm guessing it's either the game engine itself, the graphics card's waiting for the game engine for something. You don't get any, it doesn't cause any stuttering or anything. It runs really smoothly, but it's just that the frame time graph is and the GPU busy delay is not in sync. So that means the GPU is waiting for something, and that's probably something from the game engine. It's not very well optimized. It's not CPU bottlenecked by any means. I've checked that. The CPU is quite happy. It is quite CPU intensive, but that's not the issue. I've tried it on all 3 of my systems. So that's the 9900X Ryzen 9, I've tested it on the Ryzen 7 and my older 5800X as well, and they're all comparable performance-wise with whatever graphics card you have in. So it's got to be the game engine itself. But anyway, I'm sort of going off topic here. Let's get to the settings. So yeah, 4K. Preset is very high. That's what it defaults to when you do the auto detect. And then like I say, I've got the DLSS enabled on a balance mode, and then we've got the 2x frame generation. And then it's only Cyberpunk as well that it wasn't maxed out. Let's quickly have a look at Cyberpunk and we'll go through that. Right, Cyberpunk, another demanding game, not as much as Borderlands 4, but just to go over quickly, the preset was actually Ray Trace Ultra. It's one back from the overdrive. It says custom because I've enabled frame generation, but we're using DLSS quality with the new transformer model, and again, like I said, the frame generation, path tracing's off, and that's the same for the other 3 games as well. I won't bother going into those games to show you the settings, but they're on maximum settings with DLSS quality and ×2 frame gen, and if it have the optional path tracing, then that's disabled. Let's go and have a look at these results then. Finally, we got to the results. Right then, so starting with Borderlands 4. So what we've got on this graph, we've got the average frames per second. So that's not maximum. That is the average over a 2-minute period for 3 runs and then averaged out. So we've got the 5080 in blue and then the 5070 Ti in orange. So in Borderlands 4 then, it's 107 frames per second to 91, which gives the 5080 a lead of 17.5%. In Cyberpunk 2077, we're 144 frames to 129, giving the 5080 a 11.6% advantage. Space Marine 2, 160 to 133, a 20.3% lead. Hogwarts Legacy 210 to 177, 18.6%. And then finally, Doom the Dark Ages was 150 frames per second to 126, giving the 5080 a lead of 19%. We've also got the first percentiles listed here. It's not the same as 1% low, but you can still think of like 99% of the frames rendered is going to be quicker than these values. But you can see the increases as well in the minimums from the 5080 from the 5070 Ti, giving you a smoother gameplay experience. So as you can see, best case scenario then from these 5 games tested was an increase of 20.3% in Space Marine 2, and then the lowest increase was seen in Cyberpunk 2077, just 11.6% increase to the 5080 over the 5070 Ti. Interestingly though, when I used the built-in benchmark on Cyberpunk, the 5080 was 15% quicker. So I don't know if it was just some inconsistencies with the runs that I recorded and the areas I chose to loop. I don't know, but yeah, let's get on with the conclusion then and see what we can take away from this. So, is the 5080 worth your hard-earned cash? Simple answer: no. Like I said at the start, the 5070 Ti is the better value card, so I'd definitely go for that. Save your money, because the performance really is imperceivable between the 2 cards, especially in gaming. Even on Borderlands 4, like we've seen, it's a very demanding game, but the experience is very similar, and it actually gets even worse. Let's close this down, because I've had a look at the pricing on Amazon since I started the video, and the 5070 Ti can be had for £740. I think Amazon's the only place in the UK you can get these 2 cards from. I think the 5080 is an Amazon exclusive, but you can see the 5080 is back up to £1,200. So that's 60% more money than the 5070 Ti for what at best we saw near enough 30% in a synthetic, but on average it was 15 to 20% more performance. So yeah, definitely save your money and go with that. It's like, if I think if you can justify to yourself it's worth it, go ahead, and you can afford it, go ahead and buy it. But it's not worth that extra cash. I'm playing this video in the background because at the beginning of the video I was saying how the 58 was 2 grams heavier than the 5070 Ti, but it's not. They're identical. I didn't realize. But the 5080 had its PCI protective cap on. There you go. And that actually weighs 2 grams. So they are absolutely identical. We'll leave that playing in the background. But while that's on, I just want to go over the power and performance of the two cards as well. We concluded the cooler is exactly the same. And because of that, the 5080 is considerably louder than the 5070 Ti. So to give you an example, in Steel Nomad, so on a prolonged period, like looping that synthetic for like 20 minutes on the 5070 Ti, you're going to be seeing maybe fan speed of 55%. But on the 5080, that's getting up to near enough 70%, and that is audible. It is quite noticeably louder. And then power wise, the 300 watt card is plenty on the 5070 Ti, as we've discussed previously. Most cases, you're not near that 300 watt cap, because these cards are so efficient. And we saw when we capped the 5080 to 300 watts, it was still a very powerful card. They do run very efficiently. But that's it for this one, guys. Thanks for listening. Any questions, pop it in the comments. But just to reiterate, don't buy the 5080, save your money, get the 5070 Ti. See you later.